Let's get started. We've got our panel here. Folks are coming in. Well, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are joining us from. Thanks for being here for today's webinar. I am Matt Staney, Vice President of Community for North America here at Hire, where I focus on building a connected network of senior talent acquisition leaders through our events, content, and insightful discussions. For those that may not know, Hire is a global in-house talent acquisition community with over 12,500 members. For those that are just joining us, there's a QR code on the screen. You can join right there. If you'd like to be a member, it's completely free. Our mission is to elevate the TA profession by creating meaningful opportunities to connect and network with world-class peers and learn in real time. And so we host regular events, dinners, and breakfasts, along with producing these webinars that you're joining today, as well as white papers and all kinds of research to keep you at the forefront of this ever-evolving industry. So if you're not a member yet, join up. It's completely free. But before we get started, I want to just say a big thank you to BrightHire, our sponsor for today's webinar, for making these conversations possible. They are the leader in interview intelligence, trusted by hundreds of high-growth companies like Canva, HubSpot, Vercel, and Ramp to elevate hiring quality and efficiency. Their AI co-pilots and agents fit seamlessly into existing workflows, helping teams build job descriptions and interview plans and deliver exceptional interviews, automate note-taking and candidate summaries, and provide actionable insights and enablement to level up the hiring process. And more recently, they've launched Screen, which is an AI interviewer built to broaden the pool of candidates considered for each role while improving hiring efficiency. And so welcome everyone, and thanks for joining. I am really pleased to welcome you to our webinar on AI interviewers and modern recruiting. AI interviews are moving fast from experimental to real use in recruiting teams. And so today's conversation focuses on what's actually working, what isn't, and what teams should know before rolling out technology like this. And so we want this to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to drop any questions into the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer them throughout the session. And then we'll also have some time at the end for maybe any of those questions that we don't quite get to. Before we get into introductions, one quick clarification. The title of today's session is AI Interviewers, but in practice, what most teams are using today are AI-led screening interviews. That can look different depending on the role and the team. Ben, feel free to start off by introducing yourself, and if you could, maybe explain what we mean by AI interviews in this context, because I know there can be a lot of confusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to meet y'all. I'm Ben. I'm the co-founder and CEO of BrightHire. Matt already gave an overview of BrightHire, so I won't get into that. But yeah, in terms of the framing for the conversation, yeah, I think it's definitely useful to be really clear about what we're talking about, what technology, because there's a lot of interesting places that AI is being applied across hiring, including to the interview process. What we're talking about today is using AI. Voice agents or video agents to have a two-way dynamic conversation with the candidate. So it's a candidate interview with an AI agent. In our case, it's a voice agent similar to sort of like ChatGPT voice mode. And the agent's configured to ask questions of the candidate, gather information that the system can then synthesize and summarize back to hiring teams to create efficiency. And it's a two-way conversation, which means that the candidate can ask the agent questions about the role, the company, and the agent's equipped to answer those as well. So that's specifically what we're talking about today. And yeah, really excited to be joined by so many great folks on the panel.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Ben. And now let's hear from the rest of our panel. And so if you could each just briefly introduce yourselves, your background, and how you're using maybe AI screening or interviewing technology today. Yeah, let's start with Rupal.
Yep. Hi, good morning, everyone. Really happy to be a part of this panel today. I work with Yext, and I've been with Yext for almost 5 years now as a part of the talent acquisition team. I lead the recruitment for our APAC offices, primarily in India and the Philippines. Over the past few months, we've started exploring BrightHire's AI screening tool, especially for as an additional layer of qualification in our early stages of interview for some of the high volume roles that we hire for. I'm really looking forward to share some of the learnings that we've had over the past few months and also hear from all of your perspectives.
Awesome. Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Bridget Snyder. I'm the recruiting operations specialist at Overjet. We're the world's leader in dental AI. We started using BrightHire Screen in early Q4 of last year. It's been fantastic. Similar to Rupal, we use the screen tool for high volume roles, so US-based SDRs, US-based support engineers. And we also find it very helpful for international roles as well, so solutions engineers or roles of that nature based in Pakistan or the Philippines.
Awesome. Thanks,
Yep.
Bridget.
And my name is Jason. I'm a senior TA manager here with Angi. I've been in the TA space for 13 years now, with over half of that time being in more of a leadership and development type of role across a few different industries. Currently, we've been using BrightHire for a bit of time now, 3+ years for more of our entire organization on corporate roles. I run with our sales side of the business, so we've probably for the past I've spent about 2 years really working side by side with Ben and his team on a really to create efficiency and better practices with our team and interviews in general. But we, as of recently, Q4 last year, we really took on the new AI screening tool that they offered. Really, the whole point of that was to create or enhance efficiency, consistency, and just overall effectiveness with our SMB sales roles that we have.
Awesome. It's great. Well, let's get into our discussion. So why interviewers? Why AI interviews? Why now? Right? Like, let's start with what's pushed teams to consider AI interviewers in the first place. And Ben, maybe you can give us a bit of an origin story. Like, what were you hearing from teams that led you to kind of expand your product into AI interviewers?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. In the sense that we actually built a prototype of this product almost 2 years ago. For some of our very high volume clients, we serve companies like, in technology and professional spaces like the folks on this call, but also, clients in healthcare and other very high volume spaces. And obviously in those industries, just the velocity and the volume is so high that, there's a real need to find ways to gain efficiency at scale. At the time, we didn't feel like the technology was really there. We thought it was really, really powerful and cool, but that the technology wasn't necessarily there to support, a great experience. And then, I'd say at the outset of last year, we just kept hearing very consistent themes from our clients. We generally just build things our clients tell us to build or solve problems, but teams being asked to do more with less, and particularly to leverage AI in ways that allow them to do that. Just huge surge in the number of applicants, which creates a massive bottleneck. The kind of diminishing value or signal of resumes, just because it's so easy to sort of scale, apply, and have it be customized for every role. And so I think those were the three major drivers. And then we just heard from a number of our clients, that it was a technology that they were really interested in considering for that. And then in conjunction, our clients are always looking, kind of recognize that there's great talent that's overlooked, right? There's just such a volume and velocity of great candidates that are coming in. It's really hard to, get the right signal and spend enough time to service sort of everyone that can be great, and looking for opportunities to do that. So, I think all those things came together and we realized that it was something that, would solve a lot of real problems for our clients, and that the technology had come, a very long way to make it, just a much better experience, more powerful.
Very cool. Rupal, what hiring challenge made you open to letting AI handle part of the screening? Walk us through that.
Yeah, I think honestly, Ben has really touched upon all those challenges. We started using AI screen for high volume hires that we make for software engineering roles. The main challenge was really the volume of applications that came in. The minute you turn on a job post, you get thousands of applications, especially in a region like India. So it's really not realistic for a recruiter or even a team of recruiters to go through each and every profile, which really also brings up a risk of missing out on a strong candidate, and we do not want to do that. So with the help of AI screening, what we were able to do is actually bring in a lot of structure and scalability to the early stage of interviews, where we really qualify the resumes based on some of the questions that we ask the candidates during the AI interview. And this really gives back the recruiters time to work on high value processes, like doing a better culture fitment, for example, of a candidate, assessing their long-term potential in the organization. So these were the main challenges, and I think the AI screen has definitely helped us gain that standardization and scalability in the process.
It makes a lot of sense. It does seem like in this market right now, there's just a huge volume of even high quality candidates, right? And
Yeah,
so it kind of it sounds like it goes both ways. Like one, you don't want to miss out on any good ones, and two, like you don't want people to feel like it's a black hole. I think what
yeah,
this might do is
absolutely.
actually give everybody sort of a chance to make their case, right? And then the AI kind of gives you additional data that maybe the resume doesn't, because everybody's using AI and all the resumes are starting to kind of look alike, right? And so
Yeah,
that makes a ton of sense.
absolutely.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Bridget, what about you? Are there any gaps that you were hoping that AI interviews would help solve over at Overjet?
Yeah, Screen couldn't have come at a more perfect time for us, honestly. As I mentioned, we started looking at the tool in early Q4 of last year, and we were faced with a challenge where our sales recruiter was actually going on her honeymoon for the month of October, and we didn't have another recruiter to necessarily cover that bandwidth in terms of availability to get on phone screens. And we were being asked to hire at least 10 SDRs in last quarter, among, all the other roles. So the tool really came in handy because I was able to deploy that for her SDR roles. We didn't lose candidates, we didn't lose quality, we actually sped up the process as well. And we continued to make hires, SDR hires, while she was out of office. Now that she's returned, we still use the tool because it's proven to be really effective. But
Yeah.
we were able to bridge a gap of really limited bandwidth without losing any of the necessary functions of our process.
That's interesting that you're using it in sales, because I've heard some people using it in sales, and it being a little difficult to figure out the skills around like communication and stuff like that, because AI isn't looking for that. But but it sounds like doing that first screen though, that's kind of a repetitive thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, like you're asking the same question to the same candidate. Like if they can kind of do it on their time and analyze it, do you still do another recruiter screen or chat after that? Like what's the process after they do that initial screen?
Yeah, for us, it does replace that initial recruiter screen. After this
Cool.
process, they meet with the hiring manager, and then these SDR candidates come on site to interview as a final round. Now, I'm sure we'll get into this more in the other webinar, but we don't replace the human interaction and the human project management in the process with the AI screener. We don't believe that's why it's here, and we
Yeah.
don't remove the human from the process. So I always check in with someone after they complete an AI interview, especially if there was any technical difficulties. I make sure, hey, this is what happened. This is the expected result. You didn't receive that. Here's what we're going to do with Bright Hire to make sure it's better next time. But they're definitely, while we do use the screen tool, we don't replace the human, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit.
It's great. Yeah, super important. Yeah, so let's talk about the roles and use cases here then. And, I think teams are curious not just like why interviews, but like how they're actually being used today. And so that's super helpful to start getting into that now. And then and then how they're showing up in real hiring workflows. So Jason, you're using AI interviews differently than most of the teams I've talked to. Like where do they sit in your process today, and why did you choose to place them there?
So I definitely wanted to test and see the full capabilities of this platform here. Um, we place ours rather than being a screener on the front end, more in the middle of our process, right? So kind of what Bridget was saying, they're still having that human element because there's a few phases that we take our candidates through in our process, and we didn't want to remove the human element from the very beginning, especially with a lot of our team going out and prospecting or finding these candidates themselves. The worst thing for a candidate experience would be like, hey, I found you, you're a great candidate, but then also here you go, you're gonna talk to this. We wanted to make sure that that human element, that candidate experience is still there. So we do it in the middle of our process, which is what we call our formal interview with a recruiter. Those questions are more behavior based to really line up and ensure, does this candidate hit not necessarily the requirements, because that's what we're looking for on the front end, but more of the competencies of what things that you can't train someone to do. There's the inner things that they have. And so at the very beginning of it, really just not was unsure. Is this going to work? Is it not? Meeting with Ben's product team and everybody on that implementation team, I knew from the very beginning we were on to something pretty unique and special.
Wow, that's really interesting because it almost defies conventions, right? That a lot of people are using these for more of the hard skills, but you're using it for more of the soft skills.
Right.
Like how long have you been doing this? Like what are you starting to get some proof or some data that's showing that this approach is working? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we spent Q4 doing this of this past year, and I didn't know what to expect. The cool thing about it from the Bright Hire team was if I would notice something from going back and reviewing some of the calls, like we'll call it a glitch or something, they already know about it before I even come to them with it, and have already resolved the issue. So the team is just phenomenal with that. So that was where I thought it might be an issue with the candidate experience, just something new. Candidates were absolutely ecstatic about this. I believe from our when it's completed, the candidate experience survey that goes out, we had 4.8 out of 5. Candidates love this. It created more efficiency amongst our teams as well. And the biggest piece was hiring conversion rates maintain the same. I assume there would probably be a slight decrease just because it's a change in process. It's
Yeah.
not the human element, but it maintained the same.
Interesting, and I wonder if it's because you start with more human interactions, and so you have a little more time to kind of prepare them, kind of get them to understand the why about that part of the process, and then they go into it. Versus if you're doing a screening, you almost have to do some of that comms at the front end, like as they're applying or the email, because their first interaction is AI, right? Very interesting. Rupal, what roles did you start with, and why did those roles make sense as a first use case for you?
Yeah, so like I said, we started it off just a few months ago, and the first use case, it really made sense for us to try it out with the software engineering roles. One, because of the large volume of applications that we get in, but more importantly, these roles made sense because they have a very well defined screening criteria as in relation to some of the other roles. You're able to very in a very standardized and structured format able to assess the technical capabilities, ask them questions about their projects, the skill sets, and your rubric is set in a way that you're able to really assess and see how they're articulating their answers, but also what content is being conveyed in their answers. This is then vetted, of course, by a recruiter. There is a human oversight, which is very necessary. But the advantage here is that it's really helping us sharpen our funnel. So the kind of candidates that ultimately land at a recruiter's table are more qualified, better qualified candidates, and it helps the recruiters spend quality time in further assessing their cultural fitment and then take them forward in the interview process. So that's where we've been really seeing the success as of now.
Very cool. Jason, back to you actually real quick because we're actually getting a lot in the chat that are wanting a little bit more specifics on your use case, which is someone's asking what roles specifically they may have missed. You mentioned that earlier. What roles you're using for, and then Sarah was asking around what does that end-to-end interview process look like, just so they get the context of where
Sure.
you.
So we've implemented this for our SMB sales role, so small to medium-sized businesses that we have sales reps going after. And then our process starts with an initial phone screen, candidates qualifying. It takes about 30, 40 minutes, diving through the resume, just finding out interest, qualifying just based on what we're looking for in that candidate, the hard things that you must have. We also send them through an assessment. which is the candidate would take, I think they have a week to complete that if they so choose to continue on with their process. It's more of a cognitive aptitude and a personality that evaluates that piece there. Should they meet the standards there, then that's when they get to the recruiter formal. So that's another reason why we didn't want to have it at the very beginning because okay, you would do a screen, then you would do an assessment. So you're at step 3 before you even have a human interaction. So that's why
That
we
makes a
really
ton of
wanted to
sense.
pilot test that out. Then at that point in time, we're sending them in front of a hiring manager to ultimately validate what they've said or what we've agreed upon saying, like, hey, they meet these right here. We want you guys to do this now.
Awesome. Thanks for giving us a little more color there, and I'm sure we'll dive more into some of this a little bit later too. But yeah, and we're getting a ton of good questions, so I'm going to try to weave some in here as we go. You know, uh, one of the first one was you know, have any of you successfully used these tools for more senior roles? Yeah, someone else even mentioned that they have, you know, they're in the insurance industry and a very, you know, niche or require licensing. Like, do you find that Brighthire tools like this work well for positions that have highly specific skill sets, or do you use it for more like SDR or, you know, higher volume roles? Anyone want to tackle that?
I can tackle the latter just around the specific skill sets. I would say in general, actually the platform like Brighthire or others, depending on how they're built, work really well for highly specific skill sets because like the more that you can articulate what you're looking for and illustrate it and know how to evaluate for it, like the more effective the screen is going to be. If you're not really sure what you're looking for, obviously it's harder for the screen to be as effective. But if it's a highly specific or niche skill set, then that's something that you can really ascertain pretty efficiently, upfront in your process. Then it's going to create a lot of leverage. Like the platform will certainly be able to evaluate for that if you can articulate it really well, and it'll create a ton of leverage to the rest of your funnel because you'll have already validated the kind of those key skills upfront, as opposed to having folks kind of matriculate further that maybe don't have those.
That's a really good point because, right, if you are working on really niche roles, but you have a high volume of people interested in those roles, it would be more efficient for them to be, to have AI sort of screen that out than your recruiters, 90% of the time talking to people that don't meet some of the niche criteria you're looking for. And so allowing everyone to have a chance to kind of share that and see, it makes a ton of sense. It's great. Let's
And
talk about, oh yeah, go ahead.
oh, then I was just saying on the seniority. I mean, Bridget, Rupal, and Jason can speak to that. But from our clients, I would say there's definitely a lot of concentration on roles where like scale or speed is kind of breaking the system, so high volume or high churn or offshore, et cetera. But we have folks using the product for data scientists working in the oil and gas industry, product marketers, retail store managers. So there's a pretty wide variety, quite honestly, of what we're seeing. I would say it's not like the most common for it to be a VP level senior talent at this point. That's just maybe that's the case. I mean, we do, but it's our company. But I wouldn't say that's the most common among the folks that are using the product so far. But there is a good cross section of like engineering and data scientists to more traditional high volume.
Got it.
Yeah,
No.
I
Yeah.
yeah, no, I just agree to Ben. I think at the moment, what we feel is that it might work well for candidates in the early stage of career rather than senior candidates, because I would imagine that there is a lot of nuances which a human interaction can really gather, in terms of senior candidate or senior level hiring. Yeah, so that's my take on it.
No, that's helpful. And so, question for Jason too here is if the candidate expresses discomfort with being interviewed by AI at that stage, like, are you offering them an option for
Yeah.
more of a human led version?
Yeah. At any step in the process, they have an option to opt out of that because a lot of our process just uses the Brighthire platform where the interview is recorded, AI notes for our scorecards really make that recruiter role more efficient. They have the opportunity to opt out. The majority of them do not. It's again went against what I thought might happen. It is a very small percentage that actually opt out. While we were piloting, though, I instructed my team as well. If there's any sort of anything that could pop up, whether candidate expresses dissatisfaction, doesn't want to do that, or what user error of any type, save the candidate experience, and you can go about it at the normal one. Or if the link wouldn't work or by chance, which was rare, they had the opportunity just to do that.
Perfect. Okay. No, that's super helpful. I think that answers the question really well. I think even I see some questions that are getting into what we want to get into next, which is like we got Phil Haynes asking how are you measuring this, right? So let's talk about what's actually working. Let's talk about the results. Once AI interviews were live, what actually changed in terms of be that quality or efficiency, or how your teams work day to day? Like, did they get productivity back? Because they're doing less screens. Bridget, what's the clearest sort of operational win since
Yeah.
rolling out AI screens, and what had to change in your workflow to get there?
Yeah, it's a great question. My favorite operational measurement here is time saved. Each role that you want to use the tool for, you create your own bot for it. So each role gets its own kind of space to design. And that means that each role, BrightHire provides a time saved metric on each one of those bots. You can total it up if you want, but it's very easy for me to communicate to my head of talent, to our executive team. Using this screen saved us this amount of time, this exact amount of time. It's not like, oh, well, each interview is supposed to be 30 minutes. It tallies it to the minute on how much time is saved. And in October, when we were in that period of limited bandwidth, we actually saved 17 hours of, at that point, it was my time, but if the recruiter was there, it was her time. I know categorically 17 hours given back to a recruiter allows them to focus on end stage candidates, closing sell calls, recruiting screens for higher level niche interviews where the screen isn't in place. That's a very easy metric to communicate out to anyone who's wondering if it's effective because it's easy. It's 17 hours. I now have back in my day. That's 2 days of work that I would have spent on the phone with candidates where I would get the same signal in the BrightHire screen tool. I think there's a question later on where I talk more about this, but it's important for us that we have a project manager of the screen tool. In our team, that's me, but it could be anyone that feels passionate about the product, where I am the SME of the tool. And if someone has questions, they can come to me about it and decide if it's best to use for their role, whether that's a recruiter or a hiring manager as well. We don't use it for all of our roles on purpose, but it's important to have someone who's really in-depth knowledge of the tool can guide the usage throughout the process.
Okay, very good. Okay. Oh, and just a reminder to those on the webinar, I'm loving all these questions. There are tons of questions, y'all, coming into the chat. Please use the Q&A tool. It's going to be easier for me to do it because I don't want to miss any of these great questions. And the chat stream is kind of going. But in the Q&A tool, if you submit the question there, it'll go in a queue. So I know which ones I've answered or not. And so please do use the Q&A. If we don't get to your question, it might be because it got buried in chat. Rupal, as volume and speed improve, like what metric do you watch most closely to make sure that the quality isn't slipping? People are asking too, like how are you measuring
Yeah.
quality exactly? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. No doubt that AI screen definitely brings in, structure and scale and speed to your process. But what's really important is the impact that it has on the quality. So what we do at Yext is that we are very mindful of how it's impacting the downstream quality. That is, how are candidates performing at every stage of interview? It's really important, and it's working well if you see higher quality or more conversion happening at every stage of interview. I can share an example of, from our use case where we are utilizing the screen for the SWE roles or the software engineering roles. Before we implemented the AI screening process, the recruiters, went through the profiles and then they send them out what we call a take-home technical assessment. It's a project-based, coding-based assessment, which all of these candidates have to take up to be able to qualify for the further rounds of interview. So at that point in time, before the implementation, we noticed that the conversion at the take-home technical assessment stage was around 20%. Now that we've started utilizing AI screen, it's really nice to see that we are able to get a better quality of candidates to the technical take-home stage. And now we see that the conversion is as high as 54%. So this is a win, already, because now we are able to make sure that anyone who goes to a hiring manager technical interview is much more qualified than what was previously.
Got it. Awesome. Ben, across teams, where are you consistently seeing the AI interviews creating the most value? Like, what are you hearing most from your sort of broad base of clients that are using and testing this tool out?
Yeah, I mean, efficiency is definitely one. So I know Bridget and Rupal already spoke to that. Just think like 30 to 40 minute, time commitment with you, if you include like scheduling and all that, turns to, 5, 10 at max. So, 3 to 8, times more efficient on just like the screen work. And I think that speaks to some of the savings that Bridget mentioned. Speed is another one. So like I'll separate the two. Speed just meaning like the time from opening a role to making hires, or from first screen to offer. And I know, Bridget and Overjet saw some results in that realm, which she can speak to. But we see that pretty consistently. And then, on the quality side, I think to echo Rupal, it's like, how efficient is the downstream pipeline, because we're more effective at identifying quality talent up front. There's we have another client where like their typical saw like a 50 to 60% pass through rate at the hiring manager round after like the recruiter screen. And now it's like after implementing screen, it's like 80%. So meaning like they're putting more qualified candidates in front of the hiring manager. And so like the rest of the funnel is more efficient. And then another one, which is like kind of related, but I'll speak to, it's a little bit anecdotal because I use the product. I just made a hire pretty recently using Screen. And this was actually a pretty senior role, very experienced analytical role. And I simply just had folks that were in the final round that I don't think would have gotten to a final round if we weren't using Screen, meaning they had like non-traditional backgrounds, like not experience didn't jump off the page to be like exactly what we were looking for, but with, you're able to cast a wider net, and then you discover folks that are really pretty incredible. And so I think that was a pretty interesting result, and maybe reflected in some of the efficiency down funnel.
Got it. And Blaine was actually asking on the chat here too. Like, is there a sweet spot that you're seeing your clients use? As far as for time spent for candidates interacting with the AI tool, is it like 30 minutes to an hour, or like what's that sweet spot?
I'll speak first, but this is the team that's using it as well. I would say generally, if it's like a screen up front, we would probably push folks to not go like as long as like an hour in an ad. Like there's a lot of signal you can get in a pretty short period of time if you're really clear on what you're looking for. And so I'd say probably closer to the 30-minute range, and not the hour range, which is a pretty long time for, I would say, like an initial screen. That's just my personal point of view and kind of the point of view of our team. But
yeah, same for Overjet. We try not to design the screen to go past 30 minutes. It's also good signal if someone takes a screen that's typically taking 30 minutes and they do take an hour, maybe they're not being very succinct in their answers. So that's another way to get signal from the tool too.
Got it. Yeah. Looking at communication style and stuff like that. Are they efficient in communicating? Got it. No, that's great. Let's talk through some of this expectation versus reality thing that's going on. I think most teams go in with a lot of strong assumptions about AI interviewers, and I'm seeing the questions related to this. So I'm excited to dive into this. So let's talk about like what's held up, what hasn't. From maybe Ben, we can start with you real quick. Just from what you see across teams, what do companies or candidates tend to worry about when it comes to adopting AI interviews that maybe really isn't an issue? And you can probably see some of the questions in the chat, like people asking like, is there unintentional bias from recruiters when candidates opt out, or people asking, just really around the adopting of AI.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost is just like the candidate experience. That'd probably be number one. I know that I'll leave it to the rest of the panel, I think, can weigh in on that, but I think that's like kind of the question number one. There's a lot of like active conversation on LinkedIn, and it gets pretty riled up around the idea, AI and hiring and all of that, with good reason. I think from our vantage point, and they can speak to their specific data, like we see a very high completion % rate among our clients. like 60, 70, sometimes higher. And then, we collect feedback from candidates after each interview. And so we're at like 4.5 or a little bit above on average across every client. So that's like different use cases, different types of roles. So, I think the data has so far spoken for itself. Obviously, we're really invested in the candidate experience. We can talk about that a little bit more and just like how do we make it as effective as possible. Because I think we believe truly, and this is why we built the product. We believe very deeply that this is like a very structured, very scalable, like very fair way to gather more information. I've seen it firsthand, but it's really important that we like set candidates up for success and make sure that they're comfortable and informed and all of that. And so that's something that we like work with our clients on as they're rolling things out. So I think that's like probably the biggest thing. I think from a candidate perspective, the big thing is like we're not auto dispositioning or auto scoring and like making hiring decisions. The product does not do that. It doesn't make hiring decisions. And so I think that's like the most important thing to communicate actually as part of your process is like this helps us gather more information that we review and make decisions based on. So I think that'd probably be the biggest one I would point out.
No, yeah, that's pretty important given all the stuff going on that, this is not something that's in the decision chain, as they would call it, right? It's not making a decision. It's super important. In fact, and Bridget, someone wanted to piggyback on something you talked about earlier with using this to replace the recruiter screen with your SDR roles.
Yeah.
And the Ross says, you said they don't replace the human element. I'd love to know more about how you are keeping the human element in it when it goes, right from recruiter screen using an AI agent to the hiring manager interview.
Yeah, sure. It's very, very important to me that if we're going to use an AI tool for screening, that people don't feel like they're getting a lesser process. I'd rather speak to a human. So what I do is every time I send out an AI screen, BrightHire does send its own email with the link. I also send an email from our ATS with my email specifically tied to it. You can let me know if you have any questions, right? I also want to make sure they don't think it's spam. So, it's my email, my signature, all that stuff. If I'm using it for a sourced candidate, I'll say, hey, we're trying out this new tool, which we are very much still in a trial period, I would say. There's lots to do. Um, Lots of candidates have really enjoyed this. I'd like to understand if you have a good experience with it as well. That's true. I want to understand how they like it, if they like it. Even if a candidate doesn't pass the AI screen, which again, I make that decision or the recruiter does, the tool cannot make that decision for me. I send them a rejection with the understanding that I'm letting you know an AI didn't make this decision. The AI screen you took did not reject you, right? We made that decision as a team after reviewing the call. And then also, if I do have someone, which I have had multiple people get to offer with this tool, I ask them what they thought, both before and after they accept an offer. So there's more space to answer honestly if they'd like.
Yeah. What do they
I've
say?
gotten great feedback. People really, really like the tool. It feels human without being like performative. Some of the other AI screen tools on the market have video, and it's just a picture of someone. Maybe they speak,
Yeah.
maybe they don't. That's not real. Brett Hire Screen doesn't do that, and I
Awkward a
really
little
enjoy
bit.
that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And Ross also had sort of a follow-up. He said, I find the conversations that I have with candidates in that first screen, a lot of times becomes a baseline for building that necessary rapport. Do you feel like your recruiters are missing that element as you've tested this? Because I think the idea is that you in the screen you kind of gather the intelligence you need to close at the end, but I'd imagine that the AI is capturing that context. Is that been the case?
Yeah, I mean, I try and create that relationship with the candidates through email. I'm not expecting the screen to deliver that type of relationship, but in our process, they get multiple recruiter touch points if they make it far. So, like if they get to our what we call our virtual onsite prep, every candidate gets a prep and a wrap with a recruiter. That's a video call like this. That's the opportunity to create that relationship and make sure there's a strong bond between recruiter and candidate for the purposes down the line. I'm not expecting the screen tool to deliver that for me, which is why I take the care and the time to create it via email if I can.
Got it. So that rapport and that time that recruiters are doing to kind of build that rapport that will help later at the close just happens a little bit later, and with candidates that they for sure know they want to move forward because they've been able to have that screener go through a lot more than they could have physically gone through, right? And so it's an efficiency, but without losing that rapport building in those touch points. Okay,
Definitely.
very cool. Awesome. Let's go to, let's see. Yeah, anyone else? You know that maybe Jason or Rupal, as far as you know, these strong assumptions, like what sort of held up, what didn't, you know, did expectation versus reality as you've been playing with this.
Yeah, I just wanted to call out one of the feedback that we received from a candidate, because our early assumption was that not many candidates are going to be taking the AI interview. What signal would it send about us as an employer? And echoing to what Bridget said, would they feel it to be impersonal or biased? But interestingly, the candidate feedback has been really, really positive. It's been almost a 4.5 to 4.6 out of a 5 rating scale. And I wanted to quote a really interesting feedback that we got, and I quote, the candidate said that this was my first AI interview experience, and it was great. I think it is better way to take interviews as it is unbiased. So this is coming from a candidate, and it gives us a lot of confidence in the process.
Got it. So you're seeing candidates even change their perception
Yeah,
of how fair the process
yeah.
is, and maybe they trust AI maybe more than humans to not be biased.
Yeah, I think it's the key is the transparency in the process, right? And communicating and over communicating with the candidates, letting them know what is this screening going to be doing and what are the expected next steps. It's really important to have that ongoing conversation with the candidates and keeping them, well informed about this particular process.
Got it. No, that's super helpful. Let's walk through like sort of the balance of human and AI, right? As AI becomes more part of the interview process, teams, need clear boundaries. What stays human and what can AI handle responsibly, right? We've got folks asking things like, when culture fit is really important to the company. Does the AI need to be trained on that? In fact, I was at a roundtable just this past week and had a TA leader say that they're using and building agents, right, like this, and they actually put those agents like through their own onboarding. They name them. They train them on the culture, and so like, has anybody gone that far with the tool? Are you using it at all for culture analysis?
I would just say, yeah, just
Okay.
like just a level set. At the end of the day, the platform can do two things. One, it can capture, synthesize, and summarize candidate answers to questions like really efficiently, right? Because the recruiter doesn't have to do screen, and so it's gonna gather that information. And the second thing we can do is if a customer defines clearly what is a successful answer or the rubric for an answer, which we help with tooling, it will compare a candidate's answer to the rubric that they've defined. And so I would just say, in terms of thinking about like what can be assessed or you could use the product, it comes down to, can you articulate clearly what you're looking for and a set of questions and assess for those things, and a reliable way to ascertain what a stronger or a less strong response is to those, just like very practically.
It needs to be quantifiable. You have to be able to measure it.
You have to be able to articulate it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be. Yeah, so like if you think about behavioral fit, maybe there's a question about like time you went above and beyond, and if you can articulate like what is a great example, what's an okay example, and what's like not a great example, then the platform will be able to support that type of assessment. So it really comes down to the ability to articulate what is a successful or a qualified candidate going to sound like when you evaluate them for the things that you're trying to evaluate them on. And if you can do that, then it'll be effective. If you can't, it's going to be a less effective type of interview to use. So that's where it can be used for behavioral, it can be used for like highly technical. It all comes down to the ability to articulate like what is a successful candidate or qualified candidate sound like, as it relates to the questions.
That's great. That's helpful
With that
context.
agent
Yes.
as well, in our process where we do that, let's say the example that Ben just gave, and maybe the candidate didn't give enough. Maybe we've all seen it. A candidate gives an answer where it's pretty vague, but they talked a lot and they did it. You can adapt that agent to where it's having back and forth dialogue. You're not just talking to a one person screen. So it says, "Oh, you talked to me about, or you mentioned XYZ. Can you tell me a little bit more about when really got assertive there?" And to really, it's going to pull. It's still the same question, still assessing the same thing, but you're getting more clarity from the bot, and
Yep.
it's almost giving them another opportunity to really give as much of that valuable information, so that when it comes to it, like Ben said, you're able to articulate that the description that it gave, the score that it's giving, and to decide, do they meet those criteria or do they not?
Got it. So the
Yep.
agent, the agent, knows what it's looking for, and so if it's not quite getting that, it's smart enough to add follow-up questions to really get the context that
Yep.
it does need. Oh, cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Jason, talk to us about like where do you draw the line though? Like where on what AI should do and what should stay human in this? Just from the balance perspective in your process.
Yeah, for us, that line's really intentional. AI is going to help us standardize how the candidate's evaluated. People decide who gets hired, right? So we start with the phone screen, like I mentioned, because rapport, motivation, early alignment, that really matters. And our AI interview sits in the middle of the process, like I mentioned. It's behavioral based competency. And that's where AI adds, in my opinion, the most value. It gives every candidate the same structured opportunity to demonstrate alignment, being to our competencies without the interviewer inconsistency or, like mentioned in the chat earlier, bias creeping in. And then the final interview with the hiring manager, it's going to stay fully human to where that's where the judgment, the context, team fit, real dialogue is going to be the most impactful. So, AI supports consistency, fairness, but humans are always going to own that relationship building and ultimately the final decision.
Very helpful. Okay, cool. Bridget, where do recruiters still need to stay active? I mean, you've talked a little bit before, like through email and stuff, but for you, as you're playing with these tools, as you're thinking, what in my process is human? What can I help with AI? Like where do recruiters still, in your mind, very much need to be involved, no matter how good the AI gets?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the AI screen tool for us it's a point in the process. I equate it to sending a candidate a take-home assignment for completion that doesn't have AI in it, right? So the AI, again, doesn't make decisions. It doesn't walk the candidate through the process. It can't answer questions it's not given the answers to. I don't think that this tool would ever be used to substitute a recruiter headcount in terms of like growing a team. Where I'm really seeing it be effective is saving time where you can then devote to that same candidate later down in the process. I actually think it's a really interesting opportunity. Maybe there's a coordinator who would like to dip their toes in full cycle recruiting. Running a process with screen could be a great way to do that. Yes, it saves you time, and maybe that candidate or that coordinator isn't ready to go live to phone screens, but walking a candidate through a full cycle process, getting alignment on comp, start date, do you have competing offers? The AI cannot manage that for any recruiter. So I think the process remains generally the same in terms of where humans are. It's just a point in time where AI is used in the process.
You're more standardizing and reducing bias around the qualification side of things,
Yeah.
of really of just validating what they're giving in the application before using the human touch that's really needed to develop the relationship, to understand more of the other nuance and intuitive areas of hiring, right? Got
Yeah.
it. It almost keeps it more fair, right? How about this? Rupal, like how can teams best combine human judgment with AI insights to make better hiring decisions to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as long as we are hiring humans, humans will continue to be a central of the hiring decision. It's really important that the final decision is based on human judgment. AI interviewers, AI screeners can definitely help us narrow down the funnel, provide us with additional data points. We look at the rubric scores, we see how they're performing, and it really helps many a time surface profiles which would have been missed, otherwise. So all of this adds as an additional data point alongside the resumes or the recruiter conversations. But I don't think AI can ever replace a human judgment. So that's really important.
All right. No, that's super. I think you're hitting it right on the nose there. And I'm looking through like the next questions we have, and a lot of these are getting hit by, by our folks in the chat, and that we've answered some. But I want to, as we've got maybe about 7 minutes left, I want to leave some room to dive into more of these questions as well. But let's talk a little bit about, because I think we've talked about recruiter and candidate experience quite a bit. So let's jump into just our final topic, which is around the rollout and the scaling of these interviewers. As teams are moving past testing, what does it take to roll out AI interviews responsibly at scale? And so, Rupal, right back to you. Like, what rules or frameworks did you put in place before doing all this to ensure that there's responsible use as you scaled it?
Yeah, sure. We give a lot of importance and emphasis to guardrails before we go live. I think four most important things which come to my mind is first, we really are deliberate about what questions are asked as a part of the AI screening. We partner closely with the hiring managers, ensure that we have the buy-in, and we're asking questions which are really reflective of the traits that we're looking for in that particular role. Second would be we would pay a lot of importance and to the rubric, how it's been set up. While some of the questions can be scored, but it's also really important that we have some non-negotiable disqualifying questions, in relation to the roles and the responsibility. The third, I think, would be we do a lot of internal trial. We act as candidates, our team members act as candidates, do a lot of trials, poke holes in the process, try and fix the gap before we really, go live. And the fourth, and I think which is the most important, and we've already spoken about this earlier, is very, very clear candidate communication. What we are expecting out of as an outcome out of this process has to be known to the candidate as well. And they should be aware of what to expect next. So I think these are the four frameworks or the rules, as you may call it, that we adopt at the moment.
That's great. That's a great rundown. Bridget, like, what were there early operational decisions that you have to make to scale this effectively? And then right on the back of that, Jason, like, what was there alignment that you needed to do across stakeholders or hiring managers when you started to expand it wider? Bridget, we'll start with you.
Yeah, Rupal really, you mentioned a lot of the things we do internally as well. I wrote out a guide for our hiring managers internally. If you are going to elect to use this tool for your roles, here is what that means. And these aren't optional. So testing it internally is not optional. It's kind of like if you were to kick off a job without a job description, you're less likely to be successful on that first candidate. If you don't test the AI interviewer internally, you're less likely to be successful with your first candidate if you push it live. So we really emphasize the internal testing and then the reassessing of the rubric we've created to make sure it's as reliable as possible when it goes live. You can edit it after it goes live, make adjustments, add questions, all that good stuff. But for us, it's not optional to do that early legwork if you're going to use the tool, especially since like these are people that are taking the AI interview. We want them to have a good experience. We want it to be fair to them. Let's make sure we do the legwork ourselves as a company so that every candidate gets a good experience.
That's great. Yeah, awesome. And then Jason, any quick little note on alignment that you did with your team across the stakeholders or hiring managers or teams before you launched it wider?
Yeah, I think the first and most critical is just alignment with senior leadership, right? It's kind of like that phrase, if mom's not happy, nobody's happy, right? So you want to make sure you've got that clear support, um, and ensuring that everybody knows it's all about enhancing the interview quality, fairness, and consistency. It's not about decision making. Like we're not removing that piece, right? And from there, it was all about building that buy-in and excitement within our own recruiting team. And once the team felt ownership and saw value firsthand, adoption followed naturally. The internal enthusiasm is what ultimately made the broader rollout, in my opinion, very successful.
Awesome. That's great. And then Ben, just lastly, from a closing question, on you know, what's next? What's next for AI interviews, and what features or capabilities are customers asking for you next? And then I'd love to jump into. There's some really good questions still sitting in here in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can go like really quick and tactical on some things that we're thinking and focused on, and then I can like speak more big picture. So things that we're really focused on, can experience, our first value is candidates first as a company. So, we're working on some, I think, really cool and powerful things that'll continue to elevate the candidate experience, like very small things, some larger things that make candidates feel like comfortable, informed, and like know exactly what they're getting themselves into before they do maybe the first screen ever or their first AI interview ever. So there's some projects in the works around that we're enthused about. The setup experience, like I think the panel spoke about this, but how you tune and set up your agent is going to dictate your ability to like be successful. So we built I think a pretty solid experience around that and spend time with our clients like with best practices, but more ways that we can sort of like bake best practices into that setup experience so that as it scales across an organization, like everyone really is getting like expert coaching on what's going to lead to the best outcomes, data and insights. Generally, we as a company like focus on insights. They're a really important part of our platform, and folks that are using Screen, get a lot of very structured, very interesting data that then can be used later on to understand what leads to different outcomes from a hiring perspective. So those are areas that I think we're excited about and focused on. I think just big picture, like the technology is advancing so fast, like again, this is gonna be like the worst version of Screen that ever exists, right? Like it's the worst AI models that will ever exist. Or right now, they're only gonna get like exponentially better from here. So the capabilities are just gonna grow pretty significantly.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you for that. And then yeah, we have maybe time to go through maybe one more out of the Q&A, and then we'll wrap this up. Uh, let's go with. Let's see. Nuno asked, how do you define scoring criteria for questions that have multiple great answers and it's impossible to instruct the AI with 100% full coverage of what great looks like? I guess I think overall what I'm seeing is as a pattern across these questions that we have left over, which is where are all the use cases and like how do you score it, right? Are which industries or types of companies are using AI powered recruitments? I would argue that at this moment almost all industries are using it in some way, to standardize some things, to from a productivity standpoint, but are mostly shying away from using it as a decision point. As we're seeing, high volume. This is in retail. This is being used a lot throughout the process. But yeah, specifically like when you have those more you know scoring criteria need to be done around those those questions where there's multiple good answers that could be accepted. Like how does that look? Yeah.
And my quick feedback, because I know we're short on time, would be you can either at the question level you can determine if you want to just summarize or actually score. So if you really don't have if it's an important area but you really don't have a great way to like crisply articulate and identify a great answer versus maybe an okay answer, it's too squishy or too hard for whatever reason, then I would still have the question get asked and I would just summarize it and not score it, frankly, and just review it on the back end. I think one trap that folks fall into designing rubrics sometimes is like false precision, like must have achieve 50% efficiency on this. Like, you want to articulate clear enough to delineate between a stronger answer and a less strong answer, but not too broad, where like if there's 8 good answers and then not like overly precise, like putting very specific, numbers, in a, that someone must have achieved, where if they achieved like 1% below that, it's like, well, it's still really good actually. But, if you're instructing, that's not in the rubric, that it's not. So in a question like that, I would probably still ask the question and summarize it, or think of how to frame what a good answer is that would encapsulate all of the good answers and just like kind of create some clear differentiation.
That's great. I think that's the useful context. I think as people are wrapping their heads, they're hearing these use cases that we needed, which is that you can instruct it to not score, but like just summarize answers so that the humans reviewing can use their best judgment if that's a good answer or not, and
Totally.
not let the AI do it. Awesome. Well, that is Amazing. This has been, I mean, I feel like we could have definitely done 2 hours of this topic. Like, there's a lot of curiosity in the market, a lot of great questions. Like, let's keep this going. This won't be the last time we talk about this stuff, right? And so just thank you so much, Rupal, Bridget, Jason, and Ben, for your valuable insights. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming and engaging. If there's questions we didn't answer, we'll try to do it offline later on. But thank you so much. You have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.